phone and do not disturb. So hopefully that'll work now. Aside from any
Yeah,
cats
I should probably do that.
that decide to jump on the table. But I am fortunate tonight to be joined by Adam Mueller of Top Line Baits. This is going to be awesome. Just his baits are freaking cool. I just got done putting some hooks on the ones you sent me the other day, actually. So
Ah, perfect.
yeah, I'm really pumped for those, and hopefully, like my description of your deeper diving crank fits with your idea for how you want me to use it. So I think that it will. I should have grabbed him, but what's up, Victor?
Well,
But yeah. Anyway, so Adam, start us off with like how did you get into bait making? How did that all happen? Like, just take her away.
all right. Honestly, yeah, I can't even remember when I actually started. I think it was like 2018, 2019 ish. Was into musky fishing for about 6 years at that point, and then I'm a contractor by trade. I've been working with wood pretty much since I was 14 years old. I have my own small contracting company, so I already had all the tools to do all the bait making stuff, and I just like to tinker with everything. Like I, I turned piano into vanities for people, cabinetry, trim work. I'm building a boat right now. Uh, I'm just
Like a
one of
wood
those
boat?
guys. No, it's actually I took an old 17 and a half foot center console, completely gutted it, put all new aluminum transom, framing it out of aluminum, gonna turn it into the musky machine. But yeah, I'm just one of those guys that just I've always worked with my hands. And I just like tinkering with different things, and just got into the whole musky thing. And I just what? And I think one of the things was on these when I started joining these Facebook groups and just seeing what the baits and everything were selling for. I was just like I couldn't believe it personally, and so yeah, I was just like what? I'm gonna try making a couple baits just for myself, and I started. I just I think I made a couple small dive and rise style baits, and I mean they're literally just like a 2x2 with the metal tail, and took some spray paint to it, and then I started learning about the whole epoxy thing, and just when I started jumping on the YouTube stuff, and
Hmm.
next thing you
Totally.
know, and I'm one of those guys. I just when I get into something, I just head first, and I got into it very hard, and like I brought some baits out here. I'll show you guys as we go through this whole thing, but just some random baits
Awesome.
that I've made for myself. And like one of the very first crankbaits I ever made, and this was like a few months into my bait making, I started watching that Marlin Baits and all his hand carving and stuff. So I ended up making this big old sucker crankbait, and I hand carved it all. And this is
Whoa.
all just done. This is all just done with spray paint. Like it's just it's got cotter pins for the screw eyes, and you know what? The lip is completely crooked on it, but it actually runs. It was just one of those things I wanted to try it. Next thing you know, I made one. I was casting it. It's like, oh, this thing looks cool, and then drop that, and then I start making something else, and then I start making something else, and that seems to be the hardest thing for me as doing this whole bait thing. When like, especially now with the dipsticks, a lot of people want the dipsticks, and I can make so many of them, and then I just get caught up, and then next thing you know, I just go and start making something for myself, and then I'll get back into making more
Totally.
dipsticks, and then I'm like, I'll make something for myself, and I have some trips planned this year, so I was like, I'm gonna make bait specific for different waters that I'm fishing. So, but yeah, I just dove in head first, and you know, and it's gone in a flash. I just, it's been whatever now, like 6 years, 5, 6 years I've been doing this, and it's a good hobby. Let's put it that way. If I can't fish, especially this time of year for us,
For
we're
sure.
just usually just building baits. So
Yeah, I mean, the artwork on the baits is second to none, and like just I think that your baits fill a really unique niche in kind of the musky category that not a lot fill. It's kind of like this perfect combination of a twitch and a dive and rise. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, as far as like the dipsticks are concerned, I should say. Versus like, I mean, I know you make twitches. You sent me a couple and a couple of cranks and stuff too. But like The dipsticks are what I'm most familiar with, especially the XL dipstick, and I think it's just one of those baits that just provides something different. I think probably the closest thing that you could get to the dipstick without having a dipstick would probably be, um, what's, the Phantom, Exorcist. That's about the only thing that I've ran that has gotten into that area of the water, but those don't carry the flash like your baits, and the profile is definitely different, which I think is advantageous in some of the waters that I fish. So yeah, sorry if I'm getting distracted. I like had to chuck a box of Kleenexes
Yeah.
at the cats because they're getting squirrely over there. But I was also
No, no.
happy to hear that you're not building a boat from complete scratch, because
No.
um,
I'm
I can only imagine what that's like. There's a couple guys in Hayward on the lake that the cabin's on that have boats that were very clearly built from scratch, very clearly not built by them. And I've almost been hit by them a few times. So
yeah.
uh, we've got some bad blood, but it's fine. I don't think that they know who I am, so that's fine.
Yeah, maybe one day I'll attempt a wooden boat, but it's even this one. This has been my third year, and it
Mhm.
just, especially the baits. And then last year, I told myself I needed to fish more because I found the year before that throughout the summer I was making more baits, and I would give up fishing opportunities because like, no, I got to get some baits made. And then I told myself, last year I'm like, I'm fishing as much as I can, gonna shut it down through the summer. And then I started working on the boat a bit more, and then I was like, man, I really need to get this thing going. So I'm hoping this year it's going to be finally on the water, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's a lot to balance. I see Brady's in the chat, and I see his baits hanging behind you there.
Yeah, you
I
see
have
that?
that I have the same lemon tail one. I have a very specific time and place that I'm gonna throw that, and I probably won't throw it before then because I want it pristine and ready for that perfect situation. So I'm definitely
Yeah.
ready.
No, it was
Jan-
awesome. I got to
oh
meet
yeah.
Brady at the New York show there,
Oh, for
so
sure.
ended up getting one of his. I'm sure you've seen him that he posted, but that's
Oh, you got one
the
of the
painted
Brett
perch.
ones. Oh man, dude.
So
Nice.
I got a specific spot, an area that I'll be casting this one for this year for sure. And
Yeah, Brett told me a couple years ago that he was going to get me a diving rise, and I still don't have it. So call a
you know what?
shout out to Brett. I'm still waiting
That
on
guy,
that thing, and I will chuck it
he
once I
is,
get it.
yeah, he is quite the painter.
Oh, it's crazy,
I
dude.
started checking out his stuff. His stuff is unreal. Very, very talented.
Flat brim got gifted an XL dipstick. Who gave you an XL dipstick? Like that is like the it's like Christmas comes early. Anyway, drop it down there, flat brim. I would love to hear who gifted you an XL. That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, Brady got his hands on a couple dipsticks. So
Don't
I've
blame
already
him.
actually got. There's a guy already in PA. He sent me 3 different net shots already from the New York show.
That's
So he's been
awesome.
putting them to work already.
Well, some of those places, I was just watching a video while I was eating dinner before this. Some guy was down south in early February, and it was like 50 degrees, 50-degree water temps down there. Like most of the stuff is open around here now, but it's not 50 degrees. It's like 40. And some of the stuff was like, we got a really crazy cold front. We went from 72, 73 degrees on Monday to or on Tuesday to uh Tuesday night it was like I think 12 or 13 degrees. So we've had some crazy weather. So there's some stuff that was skimming over again once that happened, but I'm sure it's gone now. It was pretty mild today. Just
Yeah,
so weird.
we had a weird weather swing. It was pretty much double digits. I'm in Canada, so double digits,
So
and
you're
then it
talking you're
dropped.
talking Celsius
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
Fahrenheit.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it was, I believe it was 12 degrees in the morning, and then by the end of the day, it got down to -8, and then this morning it was around -6, and now it's was back up to 8 degrees, and then going into this weekend, it's going to be double digits again.
Yeah,
So
glad to hear it's not just Iowa. For all those who are bad at math, including myself, 0 is freezing in Celsius. Anything negative is lower than 0, and anything double digits, what is that, like, probably 40 or 50 degrees here?
yeah, something like that. But yeah, it was well, I'm sure our winter's been the same as yours. It's just been so mild. We've had literally maybe 6 days of snow.
Yeah,
None of our lakes have froze,
we
at least
had,
where I am.
like 3 solid weeks of winter here, and it was so strange because we went from this, like, mild. And it was really funny too, because people talk about like animals having this sixth sense as to what's going on. And we had some geese that we were hunting, and we kind of had them patterned, and to this point where like we'd go pheasant hunting in the afternoon, and then like we'd save the last little bit for going out and pass shooting some of these geese that were coming off our local water body. But we went right before it got cold. We went to do that same thing, and all the geese were gone. They were just vanished, like just disappeared. And there were hundreds of them, 2 or 3 days before. Because I think I shot my last one, sometime that week. If I remember right, I think I went like after school or something, and it just worked out. But they were just out of there. And then, like, literally 2 days later, the temps just fell off a cliff. Like, we had this polar vortex come through. We got, like, 2 feet of snow, or 2 to 3 feet of snow in, just a couple of weeks' time, and then everything froze over. So if it was open while it snowed, then it froze over really good, but if it was capped before it snowed, then it was just, like, sketchy ice. And it was crazy here in Iowa because there were people, on some farm ponds where it was, like, 13 or 14 inches thick, and some lakes where it was the one time that I got out ice fishing in that time, it was 9 inches thick, which is plenty safe. But then there's, like, farm ponds that were capped over where they only had, like, 4 or 5 inches because the snow insulated it so much. So, it just it's just been a really weird winter. I couldn't even tell you the last time that I ice fished one time in a winter down here, but it's just I was a weird place on the latitude wise where we could have safe ice the second week of December, and that safe ice will roll through the first week of March, or we could have safe ice 2 weeks into January, and then it like this year it'll be not safe ice the first week of February. So it's just really weird.
Yeah,
Am
like
I
I've
coming?
only been up. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Brady asked if I was going to the Wisconsin Musky Expo.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure on that one, Brady. I may be doing some fishing to try and get Justin and KV on some fish and figure out what's going on because they come the next weekend. So I may be fishing Patty's weekend down here to see what's up. So I would like to go, but I've only got so much time and yeah, so much free time to do those things. Anyway, sorry, Adam. Didn't mean to interrupt you there.
no, I was just saying, like I've only been ice fishing once this year, and I had to drive 5 hours north, and we even chose a smaller lake, and there's still only about 6 inches of ice.
See, I'm kinda learning
So
that over in your area of Canada that it seems like your weather is more similar to ours than dissimilar, which is strange because, like, people think Canada and it's like, "Oh, this winter wonderland," and it's like, "Mm, not really." I mean, I'm guessing you guys probably don't get the highs in the summer like what we do here, but just, like, the ups and downs generally, I feel like yours is probably pretty similar to us, at least
yeah,
seasonally.
like our winters, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, we used to get a ton of snow here. It used to be, minus 20, minus 30, with wind chill minus 35, and you'd have a foot of snow. But in our summers, like even our summers the last few years have been pretty mild. We used to
Mhm,
get pretty warm, like 30, 30 plus with a lot of humidity. And it's just even like I think last year we had maybe uh, two like solid weeks where it was like 30, and like
mhm.
that's hot. But
Yeah.
there was never a time last year where we ever had to stop fishing because the water got too warm. Like you'd see like 75, 76 was like the highest I
Mhm.
got in the lakes I fished. But besides that, no, like it's just been the last couple of years. Summer's been pretty mild. The winter's been pretty mild.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I heard that the summers I spent most of my summer in Hayward last year, but down here it seemed from my buddies that were here, the summer was pretty mild actually, which is strange because usually there's a pretty solid chunk of time where you're not really able to fish down in these parts. And I didn't realize my first experience with Canadians and weather. So my freshman year of college, I happened to room with a couple Canadian baseball players from British Columbia, and they were talking about how much colder it was in Iowa during the winter than it was where they were at. So I learned about like the ocean effect, and I learned about that like some places in Canada don't get as cold as America. So it was very
well,
strange, but a lot of
that's just it.
perspective
Like
there.
I live right on the North Shore of Lake Erie, so
Mhm.
depending on winds, when there's a front moving in and the winds are heavy, like it can get pretty nasty. But we haven't seen that in a couple of years now. It seems
Hmm. Yeah, weather is weird. So back to the Muskies, and instead of just us being like
we're the
old people
weatherman.
talking about the
Yeah.
weather, what so how do you approach like you said Lake Erie? How do you? I know that you fish the Great Lakes. Sometimes you have some big water by you. Like, how do you approach and break down some of those bigger chunks of water? This was something I was going to talk to you about because, like, where I fish here or Wisconsin, we're talking, acreage between 300 and 5,000, whereas you're in acreages that are like miles of expanse and just tons of stuff going on. So, when you have all of that space, how do you go about breaking it down and just finding those locations that are going to be productive?
Honestly, a lot of time on the water. This has been, I think, 7 or maybe the 8th year we've been attempting some of these areas, and just there's giant sand flats, and you just move around trying to find the best structure, trying to find bait, which sometimes in the fall can be very difficult. But just from past experience, you know that there's certain areas that these fish will move to. I
Hmm.
don't think they stay there very long. So it's all timing, and the temperature has to be where it has to be. And like last fall was by far my best fall I had. Um, and I think honestly, it was because how mild the temperature was. Like, I didn't put my float suit on until literally December 13th. That's just how mild it was going all the
Hmm.
way into December. And
So you, So do you think it's just giving them more time to set up on those predictable spots that like you've had success in the past, but then since like the weather's more mild or the season kind of extends longer, it's giving those fish or even more fish time to get there versus like, well, they're here and then they're gone because we just got this crazy cold front, or what do you think?
yeah, because a lot of these fish are roaming fish. And
Hmm.
it just seemed like we've had good the bait has been really good the last few years, and it probably has to do with the fact that we've had no ice here, so no one can actually ice fish. So all these fish have been had zero pressure for all of winter.
Hmm.
And I noticed that last summer, the bait pods that we were finding were, you know, 3 to 4 times the size the year prior to that. And when we got onto those, and especially last year, I wrote down pretty much everything. Anytime we caught a fish, what the weather was, the wind direction, bait we were using, how far back, and I kept notes of all this stuff, which I probably should have done 7 years ago. But
I should probably do it now.
yeah, and yeah, just finding the bait, and we found areas where the bait would congregate, and it seemed like it was a lot of the sand flats that had boulders mixed into it. And finding those areas can be challenging because, like you said, the area that we're searching is endless, and you could drive,
Hmm.
you know, for days trying to find it. So having a previous experience and like making sure we mark everything down on the graph and going back, and we even where we got our two biggest fish this year, we actually got on two summer spots that we did really well this year, where there seemed to be a ton of bait. Even though we
Hmm.
got these two fish in the fall, that there was no bait being marked until, and this is, I was running active target this year full time when we're
Hmm.
especially doing a lot of trolling, and being able to see that soon as the sun would pretty much hit the horizon, you would literally just watch the bait. just come right off the bottom. And
That's
I wasn't
crazy.
marking anything on 2D. Even the active target, when we're buzzing over it, it's like we couldn't find bait all day. And then all of a sudden, as soon as that light was starting to dim down, you would just literally watch it lift off the bottom. And you're just like, oh, so maybe we are still in the right areas. It's just the bait. I don't know what it's because it was the weather, the wind. However, it was the bait was sitting right on the bottom until, like I said, the sun went down and it just lifted up, and then we started marking stuff. And pretty much all fall we were fishing into 2 to 3 hours in the darkness.
Mhm.
We seemed to do pretty good.
I feel like at that time of the year, it's gotta be a plankton thing and not like a bug hatch thing.
Hmm.
I mean, I could be wrong on that, I don't really know, but also, like, I feel like with active target, if you're trolling, that's one of the better applications for that, just generally. Um, Mostly because if it's like jigging, like we use like my buddy Barry has live scope, so we'll use it in the fall for jigging. But it's really weird because most of the time we're not marking fish that are eating. Like if we're marking those fish, they're not active, they're not doing anything. Um, and usually, like you said, we're using it to find bait, find active bait that's like up in the column or getting pushed around by those fish. I mean, when we were fishing in November, I mean, that was what we were using to put us around the bait, but then, when we were getting bit, it's not by those fish that you see come lazily off the bottom and they're just gonna hang out by your bondy. It's like you're on the bait schools and those fish are like positioned ready to pounce, and then, you know, they're hidden and ready to go, and then, you just happen to be there when they do. Um, I don't know, and that's kind of an interesting thing with, like, Wisconsin strain fish. I haven't fished a lot for Great Lakes fish, but, it seems to be like the Wisconsin ones really like to ambush versus the Minnesota ones, they like to hunt, and that might be just, like, conjecture on my part, but it really seems like I don't know. Even like using my side imaging and stuff, I have never caught a side imaging fish. I've had a few follow from doing it, but I've never caught one doing it. And it just those things tell me that like if they're sloughed off, then they're not active. They've either already eaten and they're just like down there chilling, or something else is weird that they're not a fan of. Because pretty much those fish that I'm catching, they're like in the structure. They seem to be positioned in a way that they're ready to ambush, and then that's when you catch them. At least in my
Yeah,
experience. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. So where we fish, the thing is, these fish are definitely hunting because
Hmm.
there's no real good spot for these fish to ambush anything. And
Right.
mind you, there's a couple areas that we found that there is some like bigger boulders and stuff, but for the most part, sand flats with some rocks mixed in. And usually, especially in the start of the fall, like we're running baits 3 feet under the surface. And, you could be anywhere from 18 feet of water to 35 feet of water, and they're getting chewed. And that's just where like, again, you're following wherever the bait is in the water
Hmm.
column.
Totally.
And usually that time of year, where I am at least, the fish, the bait fish are way up high in the column. And even in the summer, like we'd pay attention, like we found some schools of perch that could have been almost 100 yards long, and with especially active target, we're just watching two baits because I always keep with my planer board.
Hmm.
I have my down rod and my planer board rod, and I don't let my planer board rod go that far from the boat, so I can literally watch both of my baits in that beam
Oh,
from the
okay.
active target. And that's more so just for myself to watch it, to give me something to do while we troll. And then you could just watch them just plow right through the school of fish and watch the fish separate and then come back together. And we would just start buzzing through all these schools. You go slow, zigzag, and then you juice it to like 5 miles an hour, just hitting from every different angles, and it seemed to work. So
Nice. Yeah, trolling is definitely the weak point in my game. I need to up it. That's for sure. So Adam, everyone's curious. Well, not everyone. Jaron asked me, and then Zach asked me what we're drinking. So I'm drinking Coors Light. What do you got
I
there?
got Michelob Ultra.
Nice. That's a good
It's
one.
like the only beer that doesn't give me a headache anymore. I used to love drinking beer. And now I have like one, and I just get headaches. So this is the only beer I can sip on without getting a headache. So now I'm mostly at like rye or whiskey, but I had a couple
Yeah,
beers laying around. So
that's usually what I do too. I usually do the whiskey program if I've got something to sip on or whatever, but beer sounded good tonight, so that's what I went with.
yeah,
What
absolutely.
you got any big trips planned for this year? I know that last year you came to the States for 1 or 2 trips. No, you did multiple trips to the States, so talk about those a little bit.
So yes, I was in Missouri in May last year. Um, Went down. We met up with a good buddy of ours, and we got to troll for some Missouri muskies on a pontoon. And I'll tell you, if you've ever trolled on a pontoon, you'll never troll in another boat again. It's the most comfortable way to troll. And
I
down
believe
there,
that.
there's 3 lines per person, and there's just they got the big L seat, and just you just
Mhm.
lounge until a rod rips. And so we're just fishing some small reservoirs down there, and sure enough, I brought actually I have it here. Uh, and anytime I go on a trip, I tend to make baits. So I made because I know there's a lot of shad. So I
Oh,
ended up
yeah.
making this trolling crankbait, and yeah, the first fish we caught was a 48 and a very fat 48. And
I was
for
gonna say, was
Missouri,
that the
that's
one.
that's a very big fish.
Yeah,
So
that's like Iowa. 4-footers are not common, and, when
I
they are, you're doing something right, so
well, I asked
congrats
Nick.
on
I was
that
like,
one.
"What's?" Oh, he was jacked. He's like, "That thing's big." And I was like, "Well, what's the biggest fish you've ever had in this boat?" And he's like, "That one right there." Like, well, you just needed some Canadian blood down here to help you out.
No kidding. That's awesome.
So
There's a guy on our local reservoir who trolls out of a pontoon, and, his name his name is Pontoon Jim. His name is actually Jim, but we call him Pontoon Jim, and,
pontoon Jim.
Pontoon Jim, if you're watching, your talk about the, 49 that you caught trolling lives rent free in the back of my head, so thank you for that, Pontoon Jim. I don't know if it's a legit 49 or not, but whatever. I'm not gonna question Pontoon Jim.
Yeah,
Canadian
so I'm
Mojo.
actually Canadian
That's
Mojo,
great.
but I'll be back. I'm heading back to
Nice.
we had a great trip last time. I can't even remember how many fish we caught, and he even told me it was slow, but I think we had at least 6 or 7 in the boat, and lost another 3 or 4. And to have a fish of that caliber, which it was so well built too, and most even some of the smaller fish we caught down there, they're just whales. They're just so girthy.
Mhm.
And then
Depending on where you're fishing, those might be Iowa fish because I know that the Iowa DNR trades some fish for muskies or sends
okay,
muskies down there. So it might literally be an Iowa fish, which would be why a 48 is huge. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but
well, I know he told me that they did some shocking down there in the spring, and the biggest one they've ever got was like a 51 out of these reservoirs. So that's obviously a big fish anywhere you go.
oh
Even a
yeah,
48 is a big fish anywhere you go.
oh yeah.
And so that's our goal this year. We have to up the old 48. So hopefully we can hit that 50 mark. And I built a bunch of baits that I'll be bringing down for that as well,
I hope that you do.
which
That
I'm
would be
always looking.
awesome.
So like and he told me they stock it with trout. So naturally I had to make myself.
Oh yeah, that looks awesome, dude.
It's all
A little
foil
deeper.
underneath. So a
Yeah,
little deeper.
your foil stuff is just straight up money. God, it's good.
A lot. Almost, I bet you 80% of my personal baits I put foil. I hate doing it because it's such a pain, but I think there's something to it. There's just nothing else you could put on a bait that has that much flash, like besides
Yeah,
the hollow.
yeah,
But like,
it's the flash for sure.
yeah, it and they just seem to produce. Obviously, your dipstick seemed to do pretty good for you last season.
Oh god, that thing is just it puts off so much light down there. Like you can see it flashing from freaking 20 yards from the boat if you're fishing a clear enough body of water. Um, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's just down there throwing light in a place that they're not used to seeing light getting thrown like that. So I think that that's a big part of it. And then it just sits, you know, and it's not, you know, even like your bar fighter or your dive and rises that would get down into that zone. It's not the same. It's not the same kind of action. You've got a more twitchish kind of action with a big profile in a zone that they're not used to seeing those types of baits doing things, flashing things that they're not used to. So a lot of good things, and it there's a reason that it works. So, and I think that those are some of the reasons.
Well, yeah, I like I said, a lot of my baits have the foil on them, and I'm going to continue to do it. Uh, but yeah, so going back to this season, I'm also going to be after the whole May trip. I'm hoping to get down to PA at some point. I've had a lot of invites.
Awesome,
Been
dude.
talking to Brady. Hopefully, get out with Brady, and then I have a trip booked for the St. Lawrence in July, and I'm ecstatic about that because never actually got a chance to fish it. So this
Do
will be
you
my
do you
first
have the
time
bait
fishing
that
that.
you sent me a pic of? You should show that one because that thing is just
Oh,
out of control.
so this will be for some of the trolling experiences we have.
That thing is just stupid, dude. Like that thing is out of control.
So there's that one, and then I also made this bigger one
Oh
again with
man.
the
Yeah,
so
they're not ready. They're not ready. Sorry,
they're
sorry
not
for all
ready.
those people who are like listening to this as they drive or whatever, and not watching it on YouTube. You missed out on those baits, and I'm sorry for you.
Well, you have to make sure you click on the link and watch the YouTube because there's
For
some
sure,
goodies.
for sure. What
But yeah,
about
so then after July,
yeah, I was gonna say,
so after July, I'll be that'll be our opener. So I'll be fishing some of our normal stuff and hoping to get up to Lake Nipissing a couple times. That's one of my favorite lakes to fish. It's where I basically started musky fishing. So I tend to get up there a couple times a year, and then all the way into September, I go and fish the Musky Cup on Lake of the Woods. And last year, I got to fish Eagle for a couple days prior to the tournament. So I'm
nice.
hoping to do that as well. And then back to Canada for the fall season, which is my favorite time. Or I should say
Fall
back down south.
fall is just hard to beat anywhere, I think. It may happen at different intervals depending on your latitude, but yeah, it's pretty tough to beat.
It is. It's by far my favorite time of year to fish. I plus with our my work, we tend to start slowing down in the fall, so I get a
Totally.
lot more opportunities to get out during the week. Like randomly, if the weather looks good, we just go. My fishing partner has the same flexibility with his work, where it's you give a day's notice, the winds look good, moon phase looking good, we're gonna head out. And
Nice.
the fall, we do get a lot of fishing in. We put our time in the fall.
So how would you talk a little bit about Canadian fishing, a little bit about US fishing? How would you compare kind of those experiences? I know that you spent some time on like Chautauqua and some of those New York lakes as well.
Oh yeah.
You guys smoked that tournament. When was that? This fall, right?
That was
Um,
October, which I will be fishing that tournament again. And there is another tournament I'm fishing in the end of May, which I forgot about in PA as well, or New
nice.
York. So, uh, yeah, Chautauqua. That was the big baller tournament. I believe that was middle to the end of October that we
Yeah, I
fished.
think so.
That was a casting only tournament. That was the first time I've ever been on Chautauqua. Heard about it, talked to a lot of people that fished it, and yeah, it was. I definitely would like to go back and fish it, probably early fall,
Hmm.
but we're definitely going to go back and try to defend our title.
Nice. Yeah, talking to Bucko, my buddy Andrew, who live out in New York about that one, and it's like it sounds like there's a reason that those guys are willing to drive like a 3.5 hour day trip to fish that lake versus some of the ones that are much closer. So it just sounds
Well, you
like a
know
really
what?
cool
Chautauqua
spot.
was literally it's literally 3 hours from my house,
That's crazy. That is just bonkers to me. Like
so it's
some of
yeah,
the
it's
lakes that here
it's
are
closer
blow me
for me
off.
to drive to Lake Chautauqua, go across the border, than it is for me to go up to Lake Nipissing. That's 5 hours from where I live.
That's nuts. Like 3 hours for me would put me like on the Mad chain. I'm trying to think if there's any Minnesota. I don't think that there's any Minnesota lakes that I could hit in that time. And there's some Iowa lakes that are further than that from me. A lot of people ask me why I don't fish Okoboji and the Spirit chain more. And it's like geographically speaking, that's 4.5 hours from where I live now, if not five at
Uh,
this point. And it's just, I don't think a lot of people realize how big Iowa or even Missouri is because I was messaging Nick about where he's at in Missouri, and I was like, "Holy crap, that's like 6.5 hours from me." There's
Yeah.
other lakes in Missouri that I could fish that are, not that far, like 2.5, 3 hours, but that one's pretty far.
Is there an airport close to your house?
Yeah, there's a couple. If you want to fly
Because
in,
I
dude,
was
you're welcome to
well,
hang and fish if
I
it works
told
out.
Nick that I told Nick I was probably flying this year instead of driving because it was a 14-hour drive,
Oof,
and
yeah.
I much rather I don't have to bring anything besides a few baits. Like he just lets me use his stuff, and then I was thinking, I was like, well, you're not that far away. And then he also said the same thing. He's like, well, it depends on where Iowa he is. Like, well, hopefully there's an airport close by. We can make something work.
Yeah, we'll have to message about that and figure out where you're flying out of Missouri. The Cedar Rapids one is closest to me, and they run a ton of flights. So, and that's like 40 minutes, 35 minutes from where I'm at. So, yeah, would
Well,
work.
we'll have to do some talking and get that figured out because it's going to
That'd
be
be
here
awesome.
before we know it. And
I know.
I think Nick wants to do it the start of May.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we'll have to. I've got some other stuff in the works and plans. So if it doesn't quite work out this year, we'll have to figure it out
yeah,
in
yeah,
the future for sure.
no pressure, no pressure. But
I'd like to get up to your neck of the woods at some point, because that would be cool. There's some really cool stuff on the eastern side of Canada that, like, it just seems like there's just nothing out there that's quite like it.
yeah, we got some, like the Niagara River, or even like I fished the Buffalo Harbor for the first time last year. Uh, Used to fish the Niagara quite a bit, but we had a really rough year the year we used to fish it. And I think we were like 0 for 11 or 0 for 13 fishing the boat. And we just stopped going there. Just fishing in that current is such a different beast. And the
Hmm.
guys that do it have it completely dialed and they know exactly. Like, even with where you think your baits are running, now it might be a little easier with the old active target where it can actually show you.
Sure.
But and like you tend to go up current. A lot of guys will go up current trolling, and then you drive back down, and then you're never going straight. You're just always zigzagging, and you got to have the right gear for it because, like, that current could be 4 or 5 miles an hour at times, and you're doing
Totally.
2.5, if not faster, up current, and your rods are just completely buckled over. And we have trolled going with the current, and then your rods are basically just
Hmm.
doesn't even know if your bait's actually doing anything, and then obviously the dive curve of your bait is completely different when you're doing that. But that's a whole different beast in itself. Uh, and same thing with the St. Lawrence, which I'm going to find out in July. But there's lots of opportunities around us, especially if you're willing to drive. Like I said, 5 hours. There's a ton of good lakes within a 5 hour drive of me, and Lake Nipissing is one of them. So that's definitely a lake that you should probably get out to one time.
I definitely would like to. The musky hunks make it sound awesome. Everyone out east makes it sound awesome. So I think it would be cool. Yeah, the Niagara, just everyone who talks about it, like, I get more and more scared, I think, the more and more I hear about it, because I just, like, that amount of current is just terrifying to me, because, like, if you go in, you're just gone, like, there's no there's
Yeah,
nothing
you-
anybody
you're
can do,
you're you're
you're just
moving, man.
downstream.
Like, it doesn't seem that bad unless you're like by a bridge piling, and then you just see how much current's like wrapping around the bridge piling,
Mhm.
and it's like, yeah, okay, you're clipping along real good. Yeah, you don't want to
Yeah,
go overboard.
that sounds like main current Mississippi River channel kinda thing, which that stuff is kinda scary sometimes too, so there aren't, well, around me, there aren't muskies in the Mississippi. I mean, maybe, but they wouldn't be like fishable populations.
Yeah.
Um, it, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just sorry, I dropped my earpiece here.
um,
It's kind of flopped out.
I was gonna ask you, you got any other show and tell stuff? Any other fun things to show the viewers?
Oh, I got a lot of random stuff. So
Oh,
I'll show you these because these I'm actually going to be building this year. I've sent you the pictures from last fall, but so these are some of the deep divers I'll be starting to build, and
hmm
these two personally put in some serious damage for me last year when I was testing them. And this is the one that it got that 50 1/4 by 24, and then got that 48 by 25. And This one
Stupid,
just
stupid builds on those
this
fish.
oh, stupid builds. We even got earlier in the year, it was start of September, we got a 42-inch fish that was 22 inches around. And it was
That's
a
crazy.
42. It was so hard to judge the size of this fish when it was in the net. I was, and the guy that was with me, he's never caught a muskie before. He works for me. He's only caught a couple bass. Caught him his first pike, and that was his first muskie. And yeah, but yeah. So, anyways, these I'll be making a bunch of these probably for late fall. Uh, I just actually posted on my Instagram story. I have a guy that made a bunch of new lips for me, and they got
Yeah,
these
I saw
cool.
those. I was just gonna ask you, do you make the lips yourself or do you source those out?
No, I source those out from Volk Outdoors. The guy does wicked work. His lips or anything you want, really. I got a bunch of. So another thing I'll be doing, it'll be probably more for next season, but I'm getting a bunch of aluminum lips made for the dipsticks. There's going to be these deep diving cranks, and sounds like I'll probably be making some of these
Yeah,
as
don't
well.
blame you there. That looks
And
insane, dude. That is some insane next level work.
they,
Yeah.
I tested that one out, and yeah, I think that one's going to get the job done. I was very impressed with the movement of it. Um,
The jointed just offers kind of a different thing, a different vibe to it, which
100%.
I need to run more baits like that just because it's just there's just a different click, a different shimmy, those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
Bob is asking about the rippers, construction applications, where you use them, how you use them. Do they have different weightings in them? Because I've got one of your rippers. I've used it some, not a ton, and mine seems to not have a ton of weight to it. It kind of wafts, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but may not necessarily be something that everyone wants. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
so the Ripper A, I haven't made any this year. Had a close call with the router at one point, and it kind of made me a little nervous. So I haven't done any wood ones for a while. And my resin molds, they just deteriorate. They're silicone molds, so after a couple of years, they basically just crumble apart. I just haven't had time to make new ones. But this is one of the very first ones that I made. This is in like a Joker pattern, and
Solid pattern.
so this was the same batch as the one I gave Glenn
Hmm.
when I first met Glenn up at Lake of the Woods. And so being uh, a wooden bait, it's got that buoyancy, so
Hmm.
it does tend to have a lot more. It was never meant to, you know, be the same as a tube
Right.
because just being with the buoyancy and stuff, it's not so much the up and down, but it does have a lot of that glide. Unless you added a blade to the back, and even then, I would add, I'd put like a bell sinker if I wanted to get it
Mm.
more nose
Nose down.
down. And so like this is like the regular size, and then this is another personal one. This is the XL. I don't know if you can see the size difference.
Yeah, I think I've got
Obviously,
the
once
smaller version, or did you send me a
the mini
regular?
one,
Yeah, I think it's
it
a
might have
mini
been a
because it's
mini.
it's like it's like 4 inches. It's a good like springtime bait, and I think the blade I've got off the back end of it, I think is too big. I think I need to pare it down a little bit
Yeah.
because I
Honestly,
use.
I started making these just I love throwing tubes, and the only problem is I took a tube one day. I took a tube out of the package. It was brand new, casted it, and it was probably just a defective tube, and like the weight went right through the head of it. And I was just like, I bet you I can make one of these. And then I just back to the shop, whittled
Totally.
away, and I had a couple. They looked like trash, and then finally got to these and started handing them out, and then met Glenn, gave him a couple, and my buddy Zach. They caught some fish on them, and then just kind of tweaked them as we went, and then got into the resin ones, uh, which the resin ones are good too because it was so easy to add like a screw and weight to it. You don't have to worry about
Mhm.
epoxying the wood, and that was always like my
Oh, for
biggest
sure.
thing with the wood is there's always that weak point with, you know, you got to make sure it's completely sealed, and if anything's going to fail, it's going to be in that area. And
Mhm.
water would get in, and I've had it happen before where water gets in and they just crack everything. But yeah, so you can either work a normal ripper you can honestly just with your rod tip down and just pop it almost like a glide bait. You can get that bait to shoot to one side, and you just give it that hang time, pop it, or you can just almost like a bulldog, or even the way you work your dipstick.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, I
hit it,
rip I
pop.
rip those things. I work a dipstick like I work rubber, and it's not a ton of fun, but, like, again, the results speak for themselves. They're literally calling in the biggest fish in the systems, that I fish, and they're getting bit, so it's hard to deny the results.
And I see Bob. Yeah, the hook hangers. The hook hangers are a big
Mhm.
thing. I'm sure most of you know, right? When your hook hanger is this way, you can get your if you put your treble hook on the right way, you can get it to lay flat against the bait.
Right.
I talked to a guy a couple years ago, and he asked me when I was building baits with the hook hangers the other way, and he asked me why I didn't put them the other way, and he told me there was a study done at some point that you had. I was like, 5 or 6% better hookup ratio. And he's like, well, even if it was a 0.5% hookup ratio, wouldn't you rather have that extra 0.5% chance of catching that fish when you work so hard for these fish to lose them?
Mhm.
So, and then I started looking into it. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. The hook lays against the bait better. You don't get as much hook rash. Your baits will last longer. So, like,
Unless
I'm sure it's
unless
hard to
you
tell,
yeah,
but I
unless
was
you
just
fish
gonna
it.
say this bait was ran a ton this year, and there is next to no hook rash. You can
Yeah, that's
faintly
nuts,
see a
dude.
little bit here.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of teeth marks in it. And same with this one. Like this one only, I think I ran it for the 2 days, pretty much 12 hours each day. And all these are just teeth marks that are in it. There's next to no hook rash besides the very bottom.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah, unless
if you
you
can prolong your bait, then why wouldn't you?
yeah, unless you run owners, because like, owners, the way that they have it is, like, the opposite. So, they're easy to tee out, but, like, if you if you just put them out of the box on baits like that, like yours, then you'll have the opposite effect, basically.
Yeah,
Um, but again, that's just, like, knowing your hardware and stuff. But
100%.
if I put, like, the VMC high carbons on yours, I don't have that issue. So, yeah, it's just
So
knowing your
that's
stuff.
generally when I sell my baits, they come with the VMC hooks.
Mhm.
I used to use like Mustad, but I've had a couple horror stories with them. Like even this year,
Go
I
the
lost
VMCs.
a very, very big fish that actually ended up breaking the weld on a
Oh,
5/0
jeez.
Mustad, and it was a heartbreaker. So ever since then, I was like, I ain't touching these hooks. And that was
Yeah.
unfortunately that was the second time I've had something like that bend out. But VMC is the way to go for me at least. And I have a couple guys that can get them for me, so it's not too bad. I don't have to get them from the states. And we all
Right.
know shipping is just a
Yeah.
nightmare. So
Yeah, I like the VMCs a lot, especially, like, on some of my bigger rubber, I'll even change them out. There are a couple bad instances of innovations, because I know that the innovations will put mustads on there, and I've had swim and dog hooks get bent out from not even that big of a fish. I had a mag swimming dog get bent out by, like, a freaking 36 incher, and then a couple of there's one instance I can think of where I had one hit a helid dog, and it just absolutely destroyed that front hook, and there's just nothing to be done. And then getting it hung, there was one time I, like, hit an underwater log, and it just, like, and
yeah,
I'm like, "Oh, we're done with
bend out
these."
too easy. Yeah,
Yeah,
for how hard we work for these fish, that's the last thing we need.
yeah.
But
And
actually, I
I
got to show you. Or
No,
I
go
just want
ahead.
to grab some.
I was just gonna say that I feel like those VMCs retain their point better too. I don't know what, quote unquote, the high carbon technology is with it, but compared to just the standard brass mustads or whatever. Which I know that Mustad makes a variety of different hooks. Like, I've had good luck on their. Well, they don't make them anymore, the KVD triple grips, but I've had good luck
Yes,
with those.
I used to use those quite a bit, and then I just did they stop
They,
making them or something?
yeah, I think
I'm
so.
assuming
At least
so.
in the musky sizes, because I can't find them anywhere. If someone can drop a link, let me know. But I haven't been able
Because
to.
I used to use their 4/0 hooks on those Twitch baits,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
just couldn't
that's
find them anymore.
That's what I put on the Dipstick XL, is those owner ST58s, I think. They're like saltwater tuna hooks, but They're
Oh,
really
okay.
good because 'cause they're, like, stainless steel and they're super strong, but they've got kind of a, a really good, like, point to them. So then you can kinda manipulate the point, but then at the same time, they've got that really wide gap to them, and they're just, like, deadly sharp.
Are they're not too, like, thick, are they? Like, the gauge?
Well, what I like about them is that the gauge is, like, conical. So, like, it it gets narrower the further up the point that you
Okay.
get. Yeah.
Well, it just reminded me when we were talking about the Rippers. So this is your XL, and again, this is for when I go to the St. Lawrence. But so I decided to make
Oh, wow.
a great big
That's awesome.
quadruple XL, if you'll call it that. But yeah, and this thing is a also runs cool, and I have another one pretty much in this exact same pattern that I'll be bringing with me as well. Uh, sorry, I had to show that because
Oh, dude, that
I was,
thing's freaking sweet.
and just to keep the lure porn going, I'll have to show you this just because this is the longest paint job I've ever done on a bait, and also one of the biggest lures I've ever made. So
Holy
this is
crap.
also a dive and rise, but if you could see
Dude,
the
that's
scale
awesome.
pattern, this took me almost 5 hours to paint this bait, and again, it runs really cool. Uh, but I'm probably never gonna fish it just because I don't want to destroy it. But maybe when
So,
the man cave gets done one day, that'll be up on the mantle somewhere.
there you go.
Just
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, no, go ahead. I was
I
just
was just gonna answer these guys' question on hooks. BKKs, same as owners, where they're in line. That's good to know. I've heard really good things about the BKKs. I know a couple of my buddies are starting to switch to those. Um, it's probably something that I need to explore and get some. I've got too many owners right now, so once those thin out, then I'll probably explore the BKKs because they seems like it's a little easier to get your hands on those versus the owners at times. And then Dean says, any problem with the owner 3.0s? I've been switching to them. No, Dean, I love the owner 3.0s. The ST36s are awesome. I put them on all my mid deuces and some of my glides, some of my twitches, just whatever looks right with the size and the profile. I throw those on there. They kick ass.
I've honestly never used owner hooks, just VMC now.
Well, and learning through kind of the grapevine, talking to you, talking to Glenn, talking to Johnny, talking to all these different people, like knowing what is available to Canadians and what isn't is a very strange thing. And like talking to Thatcher too,
Yeah.
it's just like the stuff that you guys can get and then the stuff that you can't. It just like makes no sense to me whatsoever. But
Or the stuff we can, but then you pay 5 times the cost just to ship it over here. Uh,
yeah, and
like
it,
some of
it
my lure components come from the states. It'd be like $400 worth of components, and it's going to cost me $150 just to get it here. So luckily, I have
I
buddies in New
believe that.
York that I just ship stuff there, and when I go and see them, I get everything. But yeah, the shipping thing is just a little
It's
crazy.
outrageous because, like, I think I had a Canadian guy win one of my giveaways, and I shipped him a bait, and it was like $15 to ship a single bucktail, and I'm just like, "What in the heck is going on here?"
Yeah,
$15 US.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and,
yeah.
yeah, if I, like, ship anything like, I'm trying to think. I think I shipped Johnny a couple of Ridgeways, and that was not cheap. I think that was like 25 or $30 US. I'm just like, "Guys are killing us here. It's just a couple of baits. Leave me be."
Yeah. The shipping thing's just that's why I'm glad I got some buddies now in New York that I can just ship everything to them.
Oh, for
And
sure.
when I see them, I get stuff. And half the time, last year I didn't see them too often. So when I did see them, I had a truck full of lure components, grub tails, hooks,
That's funny.
new rain gear. I just, buying
Oh,
stuff from
yeah.
the States. But kind of forget what you buy after a couple months.
No doubt. Night, Brady, thanks for, tuning in, dude. Appreciate you.
Night, Brady. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
So,
But
you got any good fishing stories to share as we're kinda, like, winding down here? Like, any notable fishing stories or fun fishing stories to I don't know,
Yeah,
that trip your trigger? I know you don't really guide or anything, but, I'm sure you've got some crazy Great Lakes stuff.
I honestly this year, especially all the trolling that we did, I had a lot of things go on with a planer board rod. Like to start it out in the season, I was just testing a new bait, and it's in this exact pattern, this walleye glitter pattern, and I literally put the bait out 35 feet. I grab the line, going to clip the board on. All of a sudden, the like line just gets ripped
Oh,
out of my
man.
hand. So I end up setting the hook like this. And my uncle's driving the boat. I'm like, fish. He's like, what? And I like look out. The fish is just on the top of the surface, head shaking. I had to like reach around to get the rod. We get the fish in. Later on in the season, I was also one of those the crankbaits that I sent you with the longer lip, the super
Mhm.
tight wiggle. The very first time I was testing that, I just put the board on. I put the rod in the rod holder. I have the bail open. I'm letting it click out. I go to like straighten out the boat. All of a sudden, wing, just gets ripped. So a fish hit it as I was letting the board out.
Oh, man.
We end up getting that fish in. And then another time this season, we had a fish. This is actually the guy who worked for me came with me. He just hooked a pike. I netted the pike. Our boat wasn't even moving, and all of a sudden, a fish just smokes the planer board.
The
Just a
planer
full
board
out
itself?
ham. Just smokes the planer board. So
Oh my god.
I yell at him. I'm like, juice the boat. So he grabs the throttle and just hammers it, right? I almost go flying out of the boat. I have a fish in the net, just a pike. And I'm like, slow it down. He like puts it in neutral. All of a sudden that rod dumps and it was just under a 40-inch pike. So that was also, he's only caught two pike prior to
That's
that.
crazy.
Caught this giant pike and then got that fat 42-inch muskie that night. And then
That's awesome.
the very last day on December 13th is when we had a double header trolling. We just fought a fish. We have it in the net. I had to cut hooks. I stand up. My uncle is the one that caught it. I get my phone out. We're now in neutral. And this has now been probably 3 minutes. Fish is still in the net. I'm getting the camera out. I'm like, you ready? You ready? And I just so happened to look at the other planer board rod because we're kind of drifting aside.
Mhm.
And I just noticed the planer board just goes whoosh, whoosh twice. And I was like, what the heck? So I follow it back, and next thing you know, I see a fishtail on the surface. So I grab the rod out of the rod holder and start reeling. And sure enough, a fish hammers it. I got to set the hook on it, and we ended up with a twin 47s in the net. And my uncle's panicking. He's like,
That's
what do you want me to do?
nuts.
You want me to release this fish? I was like, you keep that fish in the net. I'm like, we got to take this board off. So we got it in, we get the board off. And that was the start of one of the most epic fall days we had because that was the day we ended up going 9 for 9 with that 50 and that big 48 as well.
It's just crazy,
So
dude.
and last year was, there was so much. Obviously, I ended on a very good high, but midway through the season, like our opener was the worst opener we ever had. We seen one muskie in 3 days, where we even got out the walleye rods, which we've never done. That's how bad it was. And then going to Lake of the Woods and fishing eagle for the first time and dropping the biggest fish of my life. You know, one of those fish that you go to Eagle Lake for.
I had that
And
same
then
experience, not on Eagle, but in Northwestern Ontario this summer, so
it,
I feel your pain.
so that happened. And that was the 2 days before the tournament. And then I dropped three fish in the tournament. And two of the fish, I don't even know how they got off. You know, you got them in the figure eight, you set the hook back, everything's working good. Yeah, get over here at the net. I start pulling up, and this lure pops out. Had a fish take the grub tail right off of my back of my dipstick on in the tournament as well, which it was just one of those
Frustrating.
like nothing's happening right now. And then so having all these lows and then going into the fall season, pretty much from mid November to the end of the season, we ended up going 25 for 27. So that made up for all my hurting moments, I would say, the rest of the season. We had a pretty good summer
Well, for
back
sure.
home, but you know how musky fishing is, right? You get your highs and you get your lows. But I'm glad I ended
Peaks
on a
and
high, and
valleys.
I hope I just keep riding that into this season. So
So I've gotten a couple questions on your planer boards. So first off, what planer boards are you using? And then why planer boards? And then since you guys are only getting one rod per person, right? So what is the advantage of the planer boards in that situation?
On the Great Lakes, you're allowed 2 rods,
Okay.
mostly all the northern lakes, yeah, it's only 1 rod.
Okay.
And the planer boards that I use, they're called Ninja boards,
I
and
think those
I
are the ones that
actually
Regan uses.
and they just have the little push button. The push button at
Yep.
the side will
Yep.
release the clip and the pin.
Yep.
I
Those are the
actually
ones
got
that Regan
Glenn,
uses.
yeah, and
They're
I
insane.
I showed Glenn from 54 this fall. I was like, you guys should try this, especially if you're not used to using boards. It's just so easy. It's one click of the button, they pop off. You don't have to worry about the pin. You don't have to worry about the clip. And you know what? Like they are technically walleye boards, but we're running
Mhm.
baits. You know,
Yeah.
you can run like I was running one of these off the boards, and they pull in a little bit, but unless you're running, 14 to 16-inch baits, then
Mhm.
those you probably put in your down rod anyways. But yeah, we just because we fish a lot of clear water too, so a lot of guys in this area will run boards, but they tend to run their spreads pretty wide just because
Mhm.
the water's clear. Where I've never felt that our boat scares the fish. And like I said, with the active target, I like to watch. So like I'll have my down rod and say that bait's only back like these. So I was running these 35 feet back and they're pretty much getting me close to 20 feet down. So they're very close to the boat, and which is great because then you has it that beam from the
Mhm.
active target has this in its sights for so long, obviously until you start turning.
Right.
And then my other bait, I would only have probably 15 feet from the boat, and that bait would be a little bit shallower running. So you'd be able to see this bait, say it's only, 35 feet back, and then 45 to 50 feet back is my other bait, and they're fairly close together.
Yep.
And I've had zero issues with that. I kind of think when your baits are closer together that maybe it's more of a school effect. And
Sure.
maybe if the fish sees the first one and it doesn't react to it, that second one being so close, maybe that might seal the deal. And it seems to work for us. Um, Obviously, there's some days where the water is, you can see pretty much 25, 30 feet down.
Mhm.
Then you might want to push it out a little bit further. But for the most part, that's
My
how I run mine.
cat's trying to get in a shot here.
Yeah.
No,
But
that's
yeah,
really that's great perspective actually, 'cause, the there's so many people there's so many people that, worry about, like they're like, "Oh, the water's too clear, the boat scares the fish," but then these same people are like, "Ah, there's so much pressure on my lake," and it's like, well, you can't have all of those things be true at once. Like, either you've got pressure and the fish are used to it, or, you know, there's not that much pressure, so then, maybe they're not as used to it, and then your fish might, react in a different way, but I'm with you 100% on that one. I really don't think the boats bother them that much because regardless of whether it's a musky boat, like, in my mind, pressure is pressure. So, like, if it's a crappie fisherman, bass fisherman, walleye fisherman, those guys they all got lines in the water. All those lures are throwing out vibration. Those are all things that the fish are feeling constantly. And then on top of that, like, even if it's not a fishing boat per se, if it's a jet ski or pleasure boat or whatever, or, an old retired couple tooling around on their pontoon, like those are all noises that are being made. And it's
oh
not
yeah,
necessarily a negative stimulus for that fish or necessarily like a negative conditioning that's happening. Like it's neutral. The boat's going over their head. If anything, there's times where it might be positive, where it's stirring up
I
bait or
agree.
stunning bait. So,
I think
um,
especially in the clear water, I feel like if a boat flies over a muskie's head, they're probably going to look up to see what that is. And if you have
totally.
baits moving behind it, like especially talking to the guys like the PA guys, they like short line trolling. You
Yeah,
know, they're
I
they're
I need to
leaders and
do that
out.
more.
That's something I've never done, like the short line trolling. Like,
Mhm.
maybe I'd put like a bait 10 feet back or 15 feet back on a planer board, but I've never done where they were telling me like they had a down rod at the front of the boat, and the bait was literally right beside the guy in the passenger seat. And you said you could just sit there and watch it, and that bait was the one that was
It's
burning
wild.
that day.
Yeah,
So
I need to do that more around here. It's just having the confidence and time to, like, mess with it, I guess.
100%. But I'm just reading what Bob said. So the
Yeah.
Ninja planer boards in 2 to 3 footers. It depends on the size of bait you're running behind it. If you're running, like a deeper diver, obviously it pulls that board down a bit, so it tends to be all right in 2 to 3 footers. But if you're running like a minnow style bait, a bait that doesn't pull too hard, they tend to flop around a lot. But generally, if we're out there and the waves are starting to get bigger and bigger, we just won't even put the boards on, and we'll just have our down, like, deep diver close to the rod. Then we'll have one of our longer rods straight off the side of the boat and send them out a little further back. That's just what I do when the waves start to get a little nasty out there, because I've been out there before when the waves get to like 4 footers, and all of a sudden your rod starts dumping. You realize one of the waves has flipped your planer board, and now it just starts driving down, and your rod clicker is going nuts until it starts popping
Oh,
back up. So I've had that happen a few times. So we just came to the conclusion when 2 to 3 footers, 3 footers is even pushing it, but anything 2 footer and under, will run planer boards. And if you can, I'd say a mass system is probably by far the way to go if you're going to get into hardcore trolling. And you don't have to worry about unclipping any boards. They just, the fish takes it off, clips free. You don't have to worry about any of that, because a lot of times when you're going to lose a fish, that's when the board's getting close, and if the fisherman's not paying attention, like, you just got to make sure you have a good system when you're using planer boards.
I believe that. We had a right mess a couple of times with berries and the times that we trolled. It was funny that you were talking about that one hitting, when you were stopped or whatever, because like, we got a bait hung up this spring, and so the one rod is just ripping like bloody murder. So we throw the boat in neutral, and like, we're literally walking back to check on that rod to make sure that it's up out of the timber and stuff. So then that way it doesn't get wrapped weird. Well, the like, as soon as we hit it in neutral, then the muskie smoked it. The other one, not the one that was hung up. So
Uh,
then the wind like blew us back around. So what we were trying to avoid by getting the rod up, then it happened anyways, because like, we were fighting the fish and then the wind blew us. So then it got wrapped weird on the log and we ended up losing it. But not the fish, the lure.
the
We got
lure,
the
yeah.
fish. But yeah, it's funny too, because we had that happen. Well, we didn't the year before. It wasn't quite the same. Basically, you know, fish hit, hook up with the fish, throw the boat in neutral, and then one of the shallower rods got hung up on a log. But it's just one of those deals. It's tough. There's definitely a trolling bite to be had on the reservoir stuff. I should really message Rissel and see how he does it closer, on his lakes, because they would be much more similar to ours. Because like, you message people from like Minnesota or northern Wisconsin where they don't have the timber and the logs, and they're just like, well, you just troll, you just put them down there, and it's like, no, it's not quite that simple here, because
Well,
there's all these forests that were flooded at one point, and they're not like natural lakes that just have this wonderful like weedage and all these things that are easy to, I shouldn't say easy to navigate, but you're not going to get hung up or whatever nearly as
well,
easy.
when I was in Missouri, we ended up so we had 9 rods out, and the
Hmm.
4 back rods were all the deeper rods, and like they were running anywhere from, I'd say, 8 to 12 feet. Maybe one was hitting 15 foot, and then we had our out rods. We had some baits a couple feet under the surface, some baits 6, 7 feet down. Especially where they were that time of year, we were basically finding, and that when we were down there, it was beautiful. So you could see the schools of shad just by the
Oh.
shades of color. So we would just start buzzing through them. We would hit all like the main areas that he knew where he's caught fish before, where there's some
Hmm.
laydowns. And he knew when we'd get, oh, he'd tell us like, hey, those 2 back rods, reel them up till 25 feet back, whatever. And then as we would go around the reservoir, we'd get to like the central basin, and he would just punch it to like 5.5 miles an hour. And we brought our line or our active target down, and we set it up on his boat. And we had a couple fish follow just like through the main basin over like 100 feet of water, ripping at 5.5 miles an hour. Fish just followed it for probably 60, 70 feet and then turned away. And then we even did some short line trolling blades in a couple areas, like buzzing through weeds where the weeds were probably less than a foot under the surface.
Mm,
And we are just ripping through there with a pontoon with 4 bucktails and a couple spinner baits out. And same thing, we were watching all of them. You could tell when they got fouled, you just reel it in quick, clean it, put it back out. But we never
mm,
ended up getting anything doing the short line trolling. But it seemed to be the deeper baits when we were there were the ticket. And he was running some Mortimers. We caught on a DK,
mhm,
a couple on mine, and those seemed to be the ones that were going off.
mhm.
But again, I'm sure this year will be even different. So I'm looking forward to getting back down there in May, and especially with these new baits. I want to run them.
Yeah, that's kinda like their I'm guessing you hit it about right for kind of like the push off, like, you know, they're not really in the shallow spawning, post spawn stuff, like, that's where they're starting to get off into the open stuff, and I'm guessing that's probably why the because that's kinda what happens down here too, and I'm guessing that's why that deeper stuff was working well for you guys at that time, and maybe the
Yeah,
short line stuff wasn't.
yeah, we never really got into too shallow. Like I'd say probably the shallowest we got was probably 12, 15 feet, and
Mhm.
then you'd be anywhere from 20 to 30 feet, uh, kind of buzzing around, and we'd see a
Yeah.
bunch of timber and stuff. So you're obviously I think we only had one snag, but he's got we got it out with the lure retriever. It was a DK, so he wasn't gonna let that one stay in the lake.
Yeah, you might as well just go swimming at that point in time. I mean, the water's probably, what, 65, 70. You're good, right? Olympic
Yeah, it's
pool?
doable. And it wasn't too it caught a log. Like we
Yeah.
could literally physically see it. So
Yeah.
he took the lure retriever out, we got it back, so it wasn't too
That's
big of a problem.
that's one of those things, like, if Pontoon Jim's having a good day, I'm probably having a bad day, and if Pontoon Jim's having a bad day, I'm probably having a good day because it's just
Yeah.
kinda the way that that trolling program works on those reservoirs, I think, so, yeah, I
And
don't
you know
know.
what? Trolling in general, this I was never a big fan of it. I always thought of myself as a caster, and then when you kind of get into the motion and you understand how the whole trolling game works, especially on
Mhm.
lakes that you can run more than one rod, like the whole one rod thing really does suck. But if you need to cover water, that's obviously the fastest way to do it, best way
Oh,
to do
yeah.
it. Um, but yeah, getting your baits dialed and especially with the active target for a guy like myself, I can run these baits and know exactly 35 feet will get me 20 feet down on a 4 foot leader, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And at least I could tell people when it's time to start selling these crankbaits that, I got the depth dialed pretty good.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just another tool in the arsenal. That's kinda like, it's kind of like my own maturation process with musky fishing where it's like, "Oh, I'll never troll, I'll just cast," and it's like, well, there's a time and place for it all, and you just gotta, like I think part of it is knowing when the time and the place is for each specific thing, and then being able to put that puzzle together in real time, to maximize your time, I guess, on the water, because if you're not doing your best to maximize that time, then you're leaving fish on the table, and no one wants to do that. No one's having as much fun that way.
100%. 100%. And,
So,
the click, when you hear that, like the drag rip, it, it could be all day, you're just falling asleep, and all of a sudden that everyone's just pumped just to hear that go off. But I do plan on, and that's why I got a bunch of Brady's baits, a couple areas where we mostly troll. I plan on doing a lot of casting this year, and actually probably doing a bunch of jigging, especially in the fall, especially after seeing, especially late fall, I should say, seeing how all these bait fish were like pinned to the bottom, and you
oh,
thought you were
sure.
just driving around a ghost town.
Yeah.
And even a couple of the fish that we got on active target, like one, I was running these baits, 3 feet off the bottom and just sitting there watching it, and all of a sudden a blimp just rises up out of the bottom.
Yep.
He didn't mark it until the thing came off the bottom. I didn't see it on side imaging. And like I said, we're going over sand flats, and usually sand flats are probably the easiest way to
Oh,
find a
yeah.
muskie,
Without a
right? They
doubt.
stick out like a sore thumb. I got some cool pictures of side imaging of fish. It's like, oh, there's a muskie right there. You could 100% tell it's a fish. And yeah, just to watch. And the one fish was was a 49.5 that just I was just watching my bait, and all of a sudden this big blob comes up, starts chasing it, and it was like 5 feet behind the lure the whole time. So I got the rod out of the rod holder, and I just gave it one yank forward. And as I started giving it back, my uncle's like, "I think it's got it," and I just feel the rod start loading up. So
Oh, man.
I ended up jacking that fish, and I just like look at him. I was like, "Yeah, this is a big one. Turn the boat off." And sure enough, it was just again, they're just built so well. And we ended up having 12 different interactions on active target trolling this year, and we got to see four of those fish eat, and two of them were in my hands, watching that fish come up and trying to get a fish to go. Had a
Oh,
fish.
sure.
I don't know if I ended up sending you that clip, but it was over 2 minutes long of me just playing with this fish, just ripping it forward, dropping it back, ripping it up, letting out line to get that bait to float up, and this fish was just up, down, would drop back, would come back for it, speed up, slow down, would come up, would go back down. It was just like, and then finally it turned away. And this actually, I'm almost 100% positive was that 50 incher because we did went like another 30 yards and we turned and gave her a look at this bait and
Mhm.
she ate it. And it was marked pretty much within, 20, 30 feet. I laid a mark right after we had that fish follow. And
That's
like
crazy.
I said, spun around and that rod dumped. So, but yeah, to see those reactions, and it's almost like, man, I wish I had another one so I could watch all the baits, have the one for his side of them and one for my side to see. Because when you're only seeing two of the baits and you're seeing the interactions, it's like, I wonder how many
Mhm.
fish will actually come up just to look at your bait and then not hit. So,
It
yeah.
is really interesting from a biological perspective how often, like, fish will do that, where they'll come up and, they're expending energy to come check this stuff out, like, to not eat it, which is just really interesting. Like, pike don't do that. Pike either hit it or they don't. And it's just really
Yeah.
interesting that, like, muskies have this weird built-in sort of follow caution or predatory instinct where they're like, "Ah, I'm big enough, I'm gonna investigate what this is before I actually eat it." If someone can explain that, I am all ears. I would love to hear it. But the other thing I was gonna say too is, with Brady's baits, you can jig those. I was jigging his stuff this fall a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, you just put the heaviest weight that comes with them, put it on the front,
Yeah.
and they get down there perfectly fine. They look good too.
Yeah.
I mean, they have that kinda, like, that folding action to them, kinda like a
Yeah.
dying dog, but, like, you don't I it's not the same as a dying dog, which I kinda like. I know that dying dogs can be effective, but I've had some
I
issues with hookups on them.
I
So
finally got to see a dying dog in action for the first time. My partner fishing the Musky Cup was throwing it,
Mhm.
and I just was like shaking my head. Why have I never bought one of these? Of course, I'm going to make my own for myself just after seeing how they are. And I told him that right away. I was like, I'm going to get some of those tails and I'm going to make some myself. And then I'll show you something here that I started messing around with last year, but it needs some work still. So I ended up making a wood body, but a sinking version, and I started pouring a couple of these tails. But this
Oh,
is
dang.
basically,
Dude, that's awesome. That's
so I
so
was like, I
cool.
want a dying dog mixed with a ripper, and I
Yeah.
made a walleye one too, but they still have some critiquing to do. But just the way that tail looks on the dying dog, and
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's such a cool bait. And
It's
I don't
really
think I've
unique.
ever known anyone else that would throw one besides Troy up at Lake of the Woods. All the guys I've ever fished with, I've never seen one in a boat.
So I've had
So
a couple guys ask, Adam, how one can get a hold of your baits. So I'll let you answer or field that question because there are a couple ways that you can, but it's not always easy.
no, so like I was saying earlier in the pod or in our little live discussion, like especially now, like once I get to season opener, I'm done building baits until the next season. And I have the Musky Odyssey April 13th, which I'm assuming I'll have a bunch of baits left over. I had baits left over last year. So if anyone on here messages me after April 13th, I'll probably have some baits left over. And it's basically first come, first serve. If you message me, I'll get rid of them. I'll send you pictures. If there's something you like, let me know. And if not, you can jump on my Facebook page where I tend to I say I don't build baits in the summer, but every once in a while I get the itch and I'll drop maybe, 10, 12, 15 baits. And there's a chance to get them on my Facebook page, which is Top Line Baits Blacklist, if
Mhm.
you guys need to know.
Yeah,
But besides that, that's pretty much
I
the only
picked up a
play right
couple
now.
on the blacklist. Like, I don't think people realize, like, yeah, like, we work together well, but there are also times where you'll auction off baits, and it's like, I am in those auctions, like, trying to get your baits too because they work so well. Like, they're it's not just like, yeah, anyway, I digress, but
I try to keep it like I get messages honestly daily, and I wish I had enough time to make. This is actually by far the most baits I've made in a year because I did the New York show and now this show. So I had 177 baits there. I think I sold like 92 to 95. So that's great because then I have lots of baits left over for the Odyssey. I'm hoping to bring probably the same amount of numbers there. And I, with the Odyssey, it's honestly a 3 hour show. It's not technically a 3 hour show, but the way the
yeah.
Odyssey is the first 3 hours is a absolute gong show, and then it just dies right down. So, and I was trying to explain that to the guys in New York. Like the New York show was good. There was like a little rush at the beginning, but it was just consistent all day. And then even
Mhm.
Sunday, I sold like 10 baits, which a 2 day show to me, you don't really need a 2 day show, but it was still great and it was a great venue. But the Odyssey is there's people that line up Friday at noon and stay all night and wait because they have to be there to get their hosers, their DKs, their Mortimers. And those guys
Ye
bring, like 150 baits and they're gone within an hour
Mhm.
easy. And they only
Yeah,
sell two per person. I've seen guys literally go in the front of the line, buy two baits, and just go right back in the line and hope they can get another shot at them. But after that 3 hour mark, then it's pretty smooth sailing from there.
makes
So
sense,
yeah,
makes sense.
it's if you've ever been to like you should get to the Odyssey at one point because it's kind of cool.
It would be cool. I listened to people talk about it on the Ugly Pike. There's some guy who did a video. He had like Sam Dadson on there and
Oh yeah,
talked to
yeah,
the
I
Ugly
remember
Pike.
seeing
I don't
watching
know
that
who the
vid.
heck that guy was, but I was like, dang, that looks super cool. And like Rex had, or I should say, Alex had a like a axe hatchet throwing thing last year, from what I understand, which is just
Oh yeah, yeah.
which
He
is
didn't
pretty
even
on
have it
brand.
built. It was funny when I was like the first time I met him in person. He didn't even have it built. He's got a chainsaw outside. He's cutting up the wood because he didn't bring a skill saw to
Did he just
build
bring
his
his
little target. He's just got a chainsaw. He's just hacking up. I was like, "You need any help?" He's like, "No, I'll be fine." Just
did
and
he
away
bring
he
his
went.
coffee
Yeah.
table, to use
Oh,
like he does?
oh, dude, he's a funny guy.
Oh
Rex
my
is a good
god.
guy. He it's just a blast. Like, and the other guys from the Ugly Pike were handing out beers, and it's a good time. I got to well, the night before, I got to sit there and drink with Hoser in the hotel room, and he's quite the character.
I'm sure.
It was him and was it Mike the Threat Hole from Threat Hole Baits was there. John Pencil was there. So we're all just having a couple drinks and just sitting there talking about lures.
So had a guy ask what the thoughts on a warm spring might do to Minnesota. I'm gonna guess that if the ice goes out sooner, your weed growth is gonna happen faster, and that might. I don't know if that'll greatly change things. Not really sure on that. I don't fish enough Minnesota stuff early season. Last year was really the first time that I did it. Curious what rods you use for various baits. Um, yeah, I mean, since we're on the top line thing, I'll just speak to what I use for your baits, Adam. I use my for the dipstick XL. I use my Shock and Awe 2020 for that. My 9 footer, basically my rubber setup, and I use
Yeah.
90-pound barbarian braid, and then I also use a Pandemonium leader, which can't go discounted because since the rosin material, I think it might actually be a titanium. I don't know that for a fact, but it's more dense, it's heavier, it provides more neutrality to some of those baits or more side to side wobble for rubber if you're throwing it. But in this case, like for for dive and rise or twitches, it provides more neutrality in the water, so that weight can be good, but it can also be a hindrance on some lures like glides and stuff. So you just got to know what's going on. What do you throw, Adam? What do you throw your
Yeah,
stuff on?
usually with I actually have a Shockana as well. Um, and I run like the Lexa 400. Um, I also for my regular dipsticks I run just a old Compre heavy with the Tranks 400. And I actually at the end of the season I put the pistol grips on both of those
Oh,
rods, like up higher.
hmm,
And I actually might do that for all my rods for casting. Um,
oh, nice.
I do enjoy I now have a rod that has like the pistol grip right underneath the reel, but I actually
Hmm.
prefer it up higher. It just I don't know, it just feels
It
better.
sits better.
But that Compre is like an old school rod. It's I don't even know how old it is, but it's just I use that rod for a lot of things. I use it for my glide baits. It's a 9 footer. Um, I'll use it for even my twitch baits. Um, what else do I use it for? By rippers and stuff, I'll use the Shockana as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah. For like the mini dipsticks and the regular dipsticks, I use the SWAT. I go down one side. So that's kind of like my Suic, um, kind of my dive and rise rod. That's not like
Yeah,
super small, my medium dive and rise rod, and I think that that works better. I like the load of it more, and I'll throw things like as small as soul searchers on that, which your mini dipstick is pretty much the same profile as those, so like it works
yeah,
perfect
yeah,
for that. And then I don't feel like it overloads for the regular dipsticks, I guess. But for your rippers, I usually throw those on the Shockanod just because it's more of like a
Shockana,
rubber
yeah.
type presentation.
And I tend to use a very small, like an 8 inch, just a wire leader. This
Yeah,
the split ring on it. I tend to use the wire leaders a lot more now. I
same.
used to use
Yeah,
fluoro all the time,
same.
um, but then I just found like you every once in a while, if you're letting that bait pause, and you're letting it
Mhm.
rise up, it would become in foul, right? Just because the way that
Yep.
the fluorocarbon would hang so bad, and had a couple opportunities where it did that in the wrong time when a fish is behind it.
Right.
Because I'm not sure if you do this or not. Like I've seen some of your videos when you're the way you fish it, but most of the time when I'm ripping my my dipstick, midway through the cast, I'll literally let it float right to the surface,
I
and
don't I don't
sometimes I'll
always
let it
do
sit
that,
there.
but sometimes
And even
I'll let it sit for a while.
so, was it not 2 years ago in the fall? I had a fish come in 4 different times on like 6 casts, and
Oh, man.
it just kept, you'd speed it up in the eight, and the beauty of the dipsticks too, right? I'm sure you see when you're doing it in the eight, you don't have to
Mhm.
sit there and jerk the rod to get it to do anything, right? It's got that
Right.
wiggle where it's super easy to use in the eight. But
Mhm.
anytime you do anything, this fish would just turn back around and go back to this tree. So the next time it came out, I literally just drove my rod all the way into the reel seat, just opened the bail and pulled it out, and just this bait would come up, from 8 feet
Mhm.
now. And sure enough, the fish just swings and misses right over top of it. But it's just, but that was the only thing I could do to get that fish to actually try to engage. Anytime
Hmm.
like I said, you'd speed it up, fish would turn away. I'd like stop it in the corner, fish would just turn away. So as soon as I seen that fish coming, as I got close to the boat, I would just bury the rod and open the bail and just that super slow rise up. And it missed. It was probably like 7 seconds into the rise up because you know how slow they can rise.
Oh, yeah.
The fish just does one of these, just completely misses. But so that's another thing, and that was just one of those bluebird sky days. The fish were just not moving, and when anytime you seen a fish, they're acting lazy. So a guy from Lake of the Woods was actually the one that told me about the that style of dead rise. He's like, if you ever have a fish, he's like, why don't you try doing this? So that was the first time I tried it, and I was like, okay, well, clearly this will work, uh, as long as the fish isn't blind and decide to swim on top of it. But
Was that, Steve Hiding? Because he just put out a video on that recently, and I was like, "I need to do that more." With it he did his with, like, Suics or whatever, but I,
well,
yeah.
even crankbaits like
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah,
those
Ridgeway
flat
says to do
those
it all the time.
right, you throw the ridgeways or even like that the flat sided one I sent you. The very first time I was testing these, we're up north casting it, and this is literally 5 minutes into our 4 day trip, and the trolling motor just stopped working. And I'm at the front of the boat, and I just cast. The bait's down maybe like 7 feet, so I'm letting
Hmm.
it rise up, and I'm sitting there screwing around with the trolling motor. All of a sudden, my line just goes. Doop. I was like, "What the heck, real?" Just like a sloppy, like I don't know if
Oh
I hit a
yeah.
rock or something, right? Just like one of these, and all of a sudden, like a 44, 45 right by the bow, and just. I was like, "You got to be
Oh man.
kidding me!" And but again, I was just on just a complete dead rise, maybe 3/4 of the way back into from a cast.
Hmm.
And some of the guys that I've learned musky fishing from, like they swear by it. That's why a lot of my glides. I don't even know if I have any here,
I almost picked one
but
of yours up, and I was kind of regretting that I didn't do that at some point.
well, I'll be honest. My favorite glide of all time, and it's caught my PV, is the Hang Ten Manta,
Oh really?
right? And I actually customized a few of them where I drilled out a bit of the weight so it has literally the slowest rise possible. So I made a bunch of glide baits, especially when I first started fishing, um, that just had that super, super, super slow
Hmm.
rise up. And especially on Lake of the Woods, the first time I was throwing them, we moved, I don't know how many fish just with that bait. But it was just one of those days where that was the only thing that you would see a fish on, but
Hmm.
they're still not committing to eating it. And you
Totally.
know the problem with glide baits are, the hookup
Yeah.
ratio. But I've actually caught my PB on that the Hang Ten Manta, and that's always in my tackle box. It's the easiest glide bait to run. It's got the widest glide I've seen, and I basically mimicked a style like that for myself because I just enjoy throwing those. But again, most of
Totally.
mine are a floating to almost a suspending style glide bait. But
I think that's why your Dipstick XL works so well during, like I'm not afraid to throw that thing during high skies because it's got that extra flash. And honestly, there's times where when that sun is out and it's kicking out that extra flash that I'd like it more during those high skies because it's gonna sit down there longer and then it's gonna kick out more light in that zone. And I think that there's something to it because it's just not something that other baits do, to be honest. So,
and
oh,
another thing that I noticed this season, when I did a bunch of glitter baits and the foil, I started to like leave the back all glittered or all foiled, especially crankbaits and clear water. I find with the back glittered and foiled, when those baits are rolling, there's more flash than
mm,
when the
yeah,
sides of the bait
right.
are doing their thing in the water. And again, like even this pattern, I had a smaller version of this, and I just kept
Mhm.
it. So I'll show you another goodie that I'll be throwing this year, but just keeping the glitter on the back. Have I showed you this one? This
Oh,
is also a dive and
um,
rise,
I think
but
you showed me, like, the blank of that one.
so this bait I'm going to be throwing a ton this year because this bait, when you add the weight when it's coming up, that blade's spinning when it's slowly coming up, and when you rip
Oh,
it,
wow.
obviously. So then there's
It's
just
gonna
like a
spin.
bubble trail. When you rip it, you just see the bubble trail from it, and then when it starts slowly rising, that blade just ever so slightly spinning.
Oh, wow.
So I
That's
have a feeling
crazy.
I'll be making a bunch of these as well,
Kind of like a
probably for next season.
spy bait DNR hybrid, basically.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Uh,
That is
so
wild.
I only built this. I ended up building this, and I had it ready for the Chautauqua tournament, but I ended up throwing it a little bit on Chautauqua. But it was one of those days that we only seen two fish and we caught them, and there was I think 8 fish caught that whole tournament. We were the only boat that got two of them, so
Dang.
it was just one of those days. But I plan on throwing that a little bit more this season because I have a feeling that's going to do some damage. Again, just
Yeah.
something different,
I really,
a little
I
different sound.
I really appreciate the insight and all the show and tell, all the different baits and stuff. But I know that you are an hour ahead of me, and I feel like I should probably let you get to bed. So I really appreciate you coming on and hanging out and those kinds of things. I could talk musky fishing all night, but I know
I'm
it's
same
much
with you, man.
later. I know it's much later for you there than me, and it's not quite the end of the week yet. So,
Ah,
um, yeah.
like I told you before, I'm usually up till like midnight anyways working on baits. I have a bunch of baits I got to epoxy after this, so I got
Jeez. Okay.
I got like 30 baits sitting there all painted that need to get epoxied for the first coat. This is trust me, this is the time of year where I get my baits done, so I take advantage of it fully.
For sure, man. Well, I can't tell you thanks enough for coming on. Thanks enough for the baits and all the support. It's much appreciated. Hopefully, the people at the Odyssey treat you well and buy up all your stuff.
Yeah, man, thanks. It was great. Anytime you want, I love talking, and hopefully we can make something work in May. It'd be great to
That'd
get
be
out with you.
awesome, dude. Yeah, that sounds great, dude. Thank you so much. Enjoy epoxying.
Yeah,
Talk to you soon,
no,
man.
I will. All right, man. We'll talk to you later.
Later.
See you guys.